Okay, so you want to own a private jet charter company. Beautiful white aircraft lined up on a sun-drenched tarmac. Wealthy clients stepping out of black SUVs, skipping security lines entirely, walking straight up a set of stairs into a cabin with leather seats and a bottle of champagne waiting. You picture the phone ringing, a client needing to be in Aspen by dinner, and you picture yourself getting paid tens of thousands of dollars for a single flight that takes a few hours. That's the fantasy. That's what the glossy brochures and the Instagram accounts of jet brokers are built to make you feel. Here's what they don't show you: the engine overhaul bill that lands the same month as a slow quarter, the empty leg that flew for nothing because nobody booked the return, and the insurance renewal that jumped 20% for no reason anyone can fully explain. And the fact that most charter operators are running on margins so thin that a single unscheduled maintenance event can wipe out a month of profit. Private jet charter is one of the most misunderstood businesses in the world because from the outside it looks like a business selling luxury. From the inside, it's actually a business selling something far more fragile: guaranteed availability of an asset that costs a fortune to own and depreciates the moment it leaves the runway. Let's start with what it actually costs to get into this business, because owning a plane and running a charter operation are two very different financial universes. You don't need to own the aircraft to run a charter company. In fact, most successful operators don't. There are three ways in. You can own the aircraft outright and manage it yourself. You can operate aircraft that other owners bring into a management program in exchange for revenue share. Or you can act purely as a broker, arranging flights on planes you never touch. Each of these is a wildly different business wearing the same tuxedo. A light jet, the kind that seats 6 to 8 people and handles short domestic hops, costs anywhere from $3 million to $8 million used, and $10 million or more new. A mid-size jet capable of coast-to-coast range runs $8 million to $20 million. A large cabin, long-range jet, the kind that can cross the Atlantic without stopping, can run $30 million to $70 million depending on age and avionics. And that's before you've flown a single passenger. Here's where the naive mental model breaks down immediately. You think the plane is the expensive part. It is expensive, but it's only the entry fee. The real cost is keeping that plane certified, insured, staffed, and legally airworthy every single day it exists, whether it flies or not. A jet doesn't sit quietly in a hangar accumulating value like a piece of art. It's a machine built to extremely tight tolerances, and every part of it degrades on a schedule set by federal regulators, not by how much you'd like to spend that month. Start with maintenance. Aircraft maintenance isn't optional, and it isn't negotiable. The FAA requires scheduled inspections at fixed intervals, and engines have to be overhauled after a set number of flight hours, regardless of how well they're running. A full engine overhaul on a mid-sized jet can cost $500,000 to $1.5 million per engine, and most jets have two. That bill doesn't ask whether business has been good. It arrives on schedule, like a mortgage payment for a house you can't live in if you don't pay it. Beyond the big-ticket overhauls, routine maintenance, avionics upgrades, and unscheduled repairs for a single mid-sized jet typically run $300,000 to $600,000 a year. And when something breaks mid-trip in a city without the right parts or the right certified technician, the aircraft can sit grounded for days, earning nothing while still costing money every hour it isn't flying. Then there's the crew. You need at least 2 pilots per aircraft, often more if the jet flies internationally or on demanding schedules, plus a rotation to cover rest requirements mandated by federal aviation rules. A qualified charter captain on a mid-sized jet earns $120,000 to $200,000 a year, with first officers close behind. Add recurrent training, which pilots must complete annually in FAA-approved simulators, at $15,000 to $25,000 per pilot per year. The crew cost on a single aircraft alone can exceed $400,000 annually before a single flight is booked. Now, hangar space. A jet can't just sit outside. Sun, rain, and temperature swings degrade the airframe and avionics, so you need covered, climate-controlled storage, usually at a fixed base operator, or FBO, at a major airport. Hangar space at a busy metro airport runs $10,000 to $30,000 a month depending on the market, and that's before fuel, de-icing, landing fees, and ramp fees, which stack up every time the aircraft moves. Insurance is its own animal entirely. Hull insurance, which covers the value of the aircraft itself, plus liability insurance covering passengers and third parties, can run $50,000 to $250,000 a year per aircraft depending on the plane's value and the operator's safety record. Here's the detail almost nobody accounts for correctly. Insurance premiums across the entire industry have been climbing sharply in recent years, as underwriters have tightened terms following a string of high-value claims. An operator who budgeted for last year's premium can get blindsided by a renewal quote 20 to 40% higher, with no warning and no room to negotiate. Add it all up: hangar, insurance, crew, scheduled maintenance, and the baseline fixed cost of simply owning and being ready to fly a single mid-sized jet before it ever leaves the ground for a paying passenger can run $1.2 million to $2 million a year. That's the cost of standing still. Now let's talk about what can go wrong, because the fixed cost picture is only half the story. Fuel is the next trap, and it's a bigger one than people expect. Jet fuel prices swing based on global oil markets, and a mid-sized jet burns roughly 200 to 250 gallons per flight hour. At $6 to $8 per gallon, a single 3-hour flight can burn $4,000 to $6,000 in fuel alone. Charter pricing has to bake that volatility in, but fuel surcharges are one of the fastest ways to lose a price-sensitive client to a competitor who quoted before the market moved. Here's the decision that trips up almost every new operator. Do you own the aircraft, or do you bring it into your fleet under a management agreement with a private owner? Owning feels safer. You control the schedule, you control the maintenance, and every dollar of charter revenue is yours. But owning ties up tens of millions of dollars in a depreciating asset, and depreciation on private jets is brutal. A jet can lose 10 to 15% of its value in the first year alone, and used aircraft values have been known to drop even faster during market downturns. Management agreements sound smarter. A wealthy individual owns the jet for their personal use, and you, the operator, manage it, maintain it, crew it, and charter it out to third parties whenever the owner isn't flying, splitting that charter revenue with the owner. This keeps massive capital off your balance sheet, but it comes with a catch that has ended more than one operator's growth plans. The owner can pull the aircraft from your management program at any time, often with only a few months' notice, taking their plane and the revenue it generated with them. You've built your schedule, your crew rotations, and your client relationships around an asset you don't actually own. Neither model is wrong. But whichever one you pick, you've locked in either massive fixed capital risk or fragile revenue dependent on someone else's goodwill. Now, positioning. This is the decision most first-time operators underestimate because they assume any major airport will do. It's more specific than that. The vast majority of charter demand clusters around a small number of wealth corridors: the New York tri-state area, South Florida, Los Angeles, the Bay Area, Texas, and a handful of resort destinations like Aspen and the Hamptons during peak season. Base your fleet in the wrong market, and you'll spend more money repositioning empty aircraft to where the demand actually is than you'll ever make flying passengers. Which brings us to the single most important idea in this entire business: the empty leg. When a charter client books a one-way flight, the aircraft still has to get back to its base, or onto its next assignment, whether or not anyone is on board. That return flight, flown with an empty cabin, is called a deadhead, or empty leg, and it costs the operator the exact same amount in fuel, crew time, and wear as a fully booked flight. Industry estimates suggest that roughly 40% of all charter flight hours are flown empty. Read that again. Nearly half the time a private jet is in the air, generating exactly zero revenue, it's still burning the same fuel and accumulating the same maintenance hours toward that next overhaul. This single fact explains almost everything else about how the business is actually run. Smart operators sell empty legs at steep discounts, sometimes 50 to 75% off standard charter rates just to recover some fraction of a cost that was happening anyway. A flight that would normally cost $18,000 might sell as an empty leg for $6,000. And even at that price, it's pure upside because the flight was happening regardless. This is why so much of the modern charter industry has shifted toward apps and marketplaces built entirely around matching last-minute travelers to these discounted empty legs. The empty leg isn't a byproduct of the business. In a very real sense, managing it well is the business. There's a seasonal wrinkle here too, and it shapes the entire cash flow calendar of an operator. Demand spikes hard around major holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, and around specific events like the Super Bowl, major golf tournaments, and Art Basel in Miami. During these windows, charter rates can climb 30 to 50% above standard pricing, and aircraft utilization approaches its ceiling. But the same surge that drives up revenue also drives up positioning costs, because every operator in the country is trying to get planes into the same handful of cities at the same time. The weeks immediately following those peak windows tend to be dramatically quieter, and an operator who scheduled maintenance poorly around the calendar can find an aircraft grounded for an overhaul right as the next demand spike arrives. Now here's where the psychology becomes just as important as the math. Why do wealthy clients pay $15,000 for a 2-hour flight that a commercial first-class ticket would cover for a fraction of the price? Part of it is genuinely rational. Time saved skipping security, avoiding layovers, and flying on exact personal schedules has real value to someone whose hourly rate justifies it. But part of it is also about privacy and control, the ability to have a confidential conversation, to fly with a pet, or to simply not be recognized in a crowded terminal. And part of it, just like a gym membership or a country club fee, is status. The charter card programs sold by major operators, prepaid blocks of flight hours purchased up front, work in exactly the mechanical logic of a subscription business. A client buys 25 hours for $200,000 to $500,000, depending on aircraft category, and the operator gets a large cash injection today against flight hours that will be delivered and cost real money later. If the client underflies their card, that's pure margin sitting on the operator's books. If the client overflies it during a demand spike, the operator can end up flying that client at a rate that barely covers the operating cost because the price was locked in months earlier. This friction between locked-in pricing and volatile operating costs is where a lot of charter operators quietly bleed money. Fuel prices move, maintenance surprises happen, but a card program sold at a fixed hourly rate doesn't adjust for any of it once it's sold. Before we get to what can go wrong at scale, there's a second layer of cost that catches almost every new charter operator off guard. And it has nothing to do with the aircraft directly. It's regulatory compliance. Operating charter flights for hire requires an FAA Part 135 certificate, a lengthy and expensive approval process that can take 12 to 24 months and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal, training, and operational documentation before a single paying passenger ever boards. Once certified, operators are subject to ongoing audits, drug and alcohol testing programs, and safety management system requirements that require dedicated compliance staff. Skip a step, and the risk isn't a fine. It's losing the certificate entirely, which means grounding the entire fleet overnight. So how does a charter operator actually make money in plain mechanical terms? The core engine looks simple on paper. Charter revenue per flight hour times hours flown minus the fixed cost of owning or managing the fleet. A mid-sized jet might charter for $4,000 to $6,000 per flight hour. If that aircraft's all in, fixed and variable costs run $1.5 million a year, it needs to fly roughly 300 to 375 hours annually just to break even. Above that, additional hours are close to pure margin because the fixed costs, crew salaries, hangar, insurance are already covered. Below it, every grounded day is a loss. This is where scale becomes the real story of this industry. A single aircraft operator lives or dies on that one plane's utilization. A larger operator running dozens of aircraft can pool demand across the fleet, repositioning planes more efficiently, absorbing one aircraft's slow month with another's surge, and spreading fixed overhead like compliance staff and reservations teams across many more flight hours. This is exactly why the charter industry has consolidated so heavily over the past decade, with a handful of large operators building fleets in the hundreds of aircraft, while thousands of small operators run one or two planes on razor-thin margins, vulnerable to a single bad maintenance month. Now, let's put it together and look at what actually happens over a full year, because two very different versions of this business live inside the same set of numbers.